The foundation of ethical culture begins with an observation. That observation is all people, at all times, and all places, operate within a moral context. That morality is universal in human nature. Well, today I'd like for us to consider another aspect of morality, because we talk about this being universal, right? Now, if you talk to Felix Adler back in the day, he would have said that in his studies of religions, he would have noted that every religion asks the question, what does it mean to lead an ethical life? What does it mean to lead a good life? Right? And every religion makes an effort to try to provide some framework, at least, for responding to that question. But when you look at the responses, they're a bit different. Right? There isn't that sense that even though there's a universal quality to what does it mean to lead a good life as a question, there doesn't seem to be a single answer that seems to work for everyone. And in fact, there's a whole collection of answers, and many of them are in conflict with each other. So one of the questions I have for us is to think about how can that be? Right? How can something that is considered to be a universal aspect be something that is so distinct and different from person to person and culture to culture? And second, and probably the more important question, what are we to do about that? What are we to do about that? The title comes actually from a story told to me by Joe Schumann. This is Walk Alongside Your Brother. And Dr. Schumann was fortunate enough to be a student of Cornell West. Very intriguing and engaging professor from now Princeton, I believe. And West, during a class, was talking about how to cope with a situation where you're faced with people who are radically different in their values and radically different in their views and their ideas about what's supposed to happen. How are you to interact with those people? And his response was, well, you know, basically, you have to walk alongside your brother as far as you can. Walk alongside your brother as far as you can. Now I realize that it kind of loses some of the aspect of at least half the world's population when you talk about it this way. However, the quality here is of thinking about there's a relationship. There's a relationship that we each have, even with people that we may not be happy about having a relationship with. Quite frankly, I think the brother thing is kind of apt. How many of us have brothers in this room? How many of you have brothers that are your best friends? Yeah, well, I'm very happy for you. You are the exception, you might notice. If you look around, a lot of us didn't raise our hands for that best friend part, right? And that's because, in many cases, because you're part of the same family doesn't necessarily mean you see things the same way, enjoy each other's company, that sort of thing. My brother and I are cordial with each other, but I'm sure we annoy the heck out of each other too. You know, I mean, you don't know what to say about some guys. You know, I mean, he has all the kinds of ideas, kind of mystical ideas about reincarnation and other kinds of things, which is very surprising to me. And he's also like very conservative on the the political spectrum. You know, I find this very annoying. In the meantime, of course, you know, here I am, the avowed agnostic or atheist, depending on my crowd for the day. And I have these strong leanings, certainly towards social democracy, bleeding heart liberal stuff, not to mention erring towards communism at times when I get into the heat of an argument. I'm sure I am easily as annoying to him as he would be to me on the best of days, all right? Walking alongside your brother is not necessarily the most pleasant of occupations, all right? And yet it is the thing that I think we are stretching for here. When we talk about always finding a way to elicit the best from each other, and knowing that when we do that, it helps us too, we are saying that we are committed to forming a relationship, maintaining a relationship, that we are committed to walking alongside our brothers as far as we can. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And a word of warning, I'm looking at myself today and said, I have way too much material. And that puts you at great risk. Because, for one thing, there's many of these things that I'm going to talk about today that I have a strong affinity for. And that means it makes perfect sense to me without saying anything about it. All right, so finding a way to talk about that may not be the easiest thing, so be warned there. The second thing is, since I have so much, I'm going to start racing into things, and there's going to be lots of stuff left out. So there it is. We'll live with it, I'm sure, and you will help me. When we get to the dialogue part, you can try to get to the things that I didn't make sense about, and maybe this isn't the last time we'll talk about this topic. I guess that could be the other piece too. Right. There are two basic ways of looking at the universal aspect of ethics. Right? And one of them is to be what you might call a moral absolutist. Right? Moral absolutists are inclined to think that there is an objective reality out there that is where ethics comes from. All right. So, if you think about laws of gravity, for instance, right? Laws of gravity are the kind of things that are out there, and everyone kind of has to participate in it, right? And you don't have any choices because it's there. And you may understand it or not understand it, but that doesn't make a difference as to whether it's there or not there, right? You may not understand gravity, but you're still going to get stuck to the planet, and if you try to leap off a building, you're going to have a bad result. All right? Moral absolutism has that same kind of quality, right? Which is to say, there are moral facts out there, and there is a moral structure, and you may understand it or not understand it, but that doesn't matter. It's still there, and it's still there to be reckoned with. Right? And I should say the founders really had this as a powerful part of their aspect, right? They were talking about how there's an ethical ideal, and they really meant this as having some sort of really powerful reality, an infinite reality, an everlasting reality. And we may not have understood it, but it was our job to figure out how to understand it and how to help it be a power in our lives. Right? Now, that's kind of a pre-Darwinian idea. Because one of the things that Darwin brought to the universe was the sense that things can be built out of random processes that come to make sense. Right? In other words, that things have kind of a tendency to organize themselves in some kind of way that over the course of time and many generations, they start to kind of hold together in ways that are predictable and that kind of make sense. Right? And so what you have as a companion to that is what you call moral relativism. Right? And moral relativism basically says, well, these concept of morality may be widespread and in everybody, but it's probably more accurate to say that this is something that has kind of grown up within culture through a bunch of processes that may not have to be a reflection of another reality, but more a reflection of what were the challenges that were faced by organisms over the courses of generations, and how did they find a way to deal with it. And since we're a similar kind of organism, that is human being, we have evolved to have certain kind of structures that make it likely that we're going to talk about ethics, but it isn't that there is some kind of external reality that is the thing that you rely on to determine what's a good ethic and what's a not good ethic. It really reflects how is it working within your culture. All right? So ethical relativism says there's a context to ethics, and you have to understand that that is the case. And the downside of relativism is that, in fact, you don't have such a strong case to say your ethics aren't as good as my ethics. Right? So when I'm walking alongside my brother and I want to be loud and obnoxious about, how wrong he is, I don't have, as a relativist, the same kind of firm foundation that I might have where ethics is more like gravity. Right? Your ethics aren't as good as mine because they don't explain things as well as mine do. We don't quite have that luxury, right? So, I don't know where you guys are at, quite frankly. In this room, I would guess there's probably a mixture of people that would ultimately look at themselves as moral absolutists, and people who might look at themselves as moral relativists. Doesn't matter, ultimately, because you know what? We have the same challenge. Even if you are an absolutist, it's still not exactly clear what is the really ethical thing to do. All right, it's hard to figure out. And it can be a lifelong project. All right, so we get to work on this project together, even if we come at it from different points of view. All right, so that's the